Hi, everyone. My name is Sara O'Keeffe, and I am the Nancy E. Meinig Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art at Philbrook. And it is my great pleasure to be here today with DeVonn Francis, the extraordinaire. You may have seen his work. He's a performance artist. He's performed at places like MoMA PS1. He was one of Eater's 2018 Young Guns. And he is just an incredible figure who's been thinking about food and community and healing. And it's a great pleasure to be here with him tonight. And just a little bit about this series, we're thinking here at Philbrook about all kinds of ways to bring art and culture directly into your home. If you're up late at night, it's 10 p.m., you're feeling hungry, you're feeling like you want a little something, we're here, we're thinking of you, and we have a whole slate of programs that we're going to unveil this month for your late night spinning, spiraling, Saturday night worries. So I'm so excited to be here with you, DeVonn. And really, you were the first person, you're the one kicking off this series with us, and you were one of the first people I thought of when I was thinking about what we all need right now as we're feeling crazed and we're seeing the world in a really wild moment. And I was hoping, for us to just talk a little bit about Yardi, which is your platform that you founded. Is it 3 years ago?
Yeah, 3 years ago, exactly. Yeah. So essentially, hi everyone, and also thank you, Sarah, for inviting me to do this. My name is DeVonn Francis. As you said, I am the chef and artist who founded Yardi, which is based in New York. We operate as a events and production company. My background is chef by practice, and an artist by practice. And so what we kind of are tasked to do with our work at Yardi is, on the surface, it's about making really amazing food, but also having people sort of rethink what intimacy and imagination looks like, especially within the food, beverage, and hospitality sector. Meal times are such an integral part to not only our own vitality, but also how we think about socializing with people. And one thing that I have identified in working in the food and hospitality industry is that there weren't a lot of points of access or points of also departure that would allow for more for the food sector to look more diverse and equitable and inclusive. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is figure out how to create an ecology within the food system that essentially allows for the redistribution of wealth and support and resource to underrepresented communities that have these fantastic food histories and food stories that essentially, in our research, we found that shape and form and are really embedded in the DNA of how we think about food as it relates to the history of America, and to really honor and respect and pay attention to those things so that people can support themselves, their own cultural values, and their own ideas. And so that's what we're doing with Yardi as of today, and as of forever, probably.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know a big part of Yardi is organizing these moments for folks to come together and to be together. And food is one part of that. Community is such a big part. You're always bringing together an interesting group of thinkers and makers. And I'm wondering, how are you? It's a wild time, and I know we're all trying to think about how to respond to, who knows what the future brings. But how are you thinking about Yardi today?
Yeah. It's actually a great question, and obviously the one thing on my mind, just to give a little brief background on what's happened to us from the start of the quarantine in New York until right now today. I literally was on my way to leave to go to an event for a client, and they called me and they were like, sorry, we're canceling this. All the 200 people that are supposed to come, they're not coming. And we obviously did the sort of like contractually, what does that mean dance? But then one after one after one, all of our events canceled. And so the first thing that I did as a business person who was like, oh my God, I have to figure out like how the lifeline of my company is being cut. It felt like, I was like, what am I going to do? And so I reached out to a bunch of friends in the food industry, and I was like, well, what's happening to you? What's happening to you in your restaurant? We're a catering company, so one of the first things to go was this idea of like, you can't have that number of how many people could gather in New York at a certain time kept going down. And so eventually what happened to catering businesses then started happening to restaurants. And some at first we're like, oh, it's probably going to affect small businesses. Big restaurants will be able to recuperate. But we found that actually like everyone is kind of suffering, and everyone is sort of like hemorrhaging, in these very specific ways, like their staff cuts, furloughs, people being laid off. And it's a really, really delicate environment just because there's so many, I think there's, millions of people who have been, are now without jobs. And so a lot of the move, I think, on a national or statewide scale is figuring out how to make sure that those people who have to have some sort of economic stability in the New York landscape can sustain themselves. So for me, at my company, I was just like, thinking about my staff and my own stuff, like how can we make sure that we can secure and support ourselves for however long this is going to last. So that was my business mind. I think on a personal level, after I kind of got over the initial moment of freaking out and being like, well, what am I going to do? I realized that there was a really important time to actually think about how fragile this moment has revealed to be in terms of how we support people, the industries that are being affected and impacted by the spread of the coronavirus, and thinking about also the fact that there are people who were already disenfranchised prior to this moment, that we were already embedding in the DNA of our brand, what we do, and the community building that we do, and wanting to really think about how we can rebuild and redevelop our business in order to still bring visibility, support, and resources to those groups and to those to the values that are very much so the cornerstones of what makes Yardi what it is. So something that we've been thinking about is how to tackle the question of accessibility, right? So that's important because our events are really great. Like we have parties, we host dinners, they're intimate, and we try to build an intimacy at every scale. But something that I realized even beyond this moment and in time for New York and all the quarantine and social distancing is that, there are young, queer, Black and brown people, underrepresented people, individuals who follow us on Instagram or follow us on social media platforms who never get a chance to actually come to our events. And that's a problem because what it means is that the ways in which we can spread education are limited to being in proximity.
Oh, DeVonn, did I lose you? Oh, wait. Oh, it cut out. It cut out at the word proximity.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I was just saying that basically the one deterrent of our events, no matter what size we do, is that events are all about proximity, which means that people who live, far away from us, who still follow our work, don't get a chance to interact with the same social frameworks that we're creating by having these dinners and events. And so one thing that we're turning to is thinking about what is a virtual 24-hour, 24/7 Yardi world look like? What does it mean to be able to have content that exists that people have access to no matter where they are at whatever time, so that the ideas that we care about can live beyond ourselves and beyond the moment of the event that we do.
Yeah. For folks who maybe haven't been to a Yardi event before, or who are following you online, or even who are new to the platform, can you describe a little bit what a Yardi event looks and feels like, and what's kind of at the core of what those events are?
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah. So the background, I won't give you a long story, but essentially, like, I'm of Jamaican descent. Both my parents are from Jamaica, and one thing that I wanted to do when I started the company was investigate my own Caribbean history. and also the intersections of that with my queer identity. So what does it mean to be a young queer person who has an immigrant background, who wants to make food when there doesn't seem to be a platform to be one? So for me, what I wanted to do was basically, I am very, very naturally inclined to asking a lot of questions and just sort of like trying to be as helpful as possible. So I met a bunch of people in New York just going to Cooper. I studied art from the art industry, and I was working in restaurants, and I wanted to bring those two worlds together because I had learned so much about culture and value and beauty through being a part of those platforms and those spaces. So for me, and also my parents and my family are huge entertainers. They always throw parties for christenings and birthdays and weddings and holidays. So we're always having people in our spaces and always sharing food as an act of generosity and an act of nourishment at the same time. And I wanted to be able to share what that did for me foundationally as a person growing up in my own household with my larger community that I was building in New York. And so essentially we would have these parties where it would be about essentially like a family style, buffet style spread, very much so stylized and aesthetically pleasing, thinking about color and shape, and also sound. Music is a huge part of our events. We hire musicians, talent, DJs, singers to essentially help to like shape the mood of the space, as well as we run a series where we have people who come on as panelists who come from different industries. So we have writers, we have curators, we have other entrepreneurs who come and talk about their projects and what they're thinking about, what they're dreaming of, to really galvanize and share their knowledge and wealth of resources and support with the people who follow our work. So we're trying just to create a very like comfortable and fun and energetic framework where everyone feels like they can participate in the dinner experience versus just going to a restaurant as you would normally and being served and then you leave, because that is beautiful, but there's more to it when it comes to food. Like food for me has always been about family. It's been about sharing. It's been about having also like really hard conversations about what's going on in the world. And for a lot of our events, we partner with nonprofits and other charities to make sure that we are spreading wealth and thinking about the sort of like lines and boundaries that are usually put up based on economics within New York.
Yeah. Well, and even thinking about where a lot of this food comes from, and you and I were talking about this earlier, but it feels like this is a moment where we're thinking about streams of where food is sourced, how does it come to you, who is bringing it to you. And I know this is something you've been thinking about for a long time, and thinking about farms. And can you share just a little bit about that whole side of, it feels like that's a key part of Yardy too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So essentially, the main reason, one of the main reasons I started Yardy was because I was traveling on farms, visiting different farmers. My friend had an amazing farm in Alabama that I spent some time on while I was in school. And then also I, actually got put in touch with this anthropologist who was studying agriculture up in Wisconsin, and she was actually doing research on lesbian farming practices. So essentially, she gave me like this huge like resource of names and just farmers who were working in, who identified as queer and GNC, that I was able to talk to about their work and about like why being connected to land, and also simultaneously why being dispossessed from owning things has changed the framework of how we think about ourselves, our bodies, and how we have autonomy over what happens to us. And I think the food space is like one of the first spaces that we see the world change and people's ideas politically about how we think about convenience and health and who gets access to those things. So doing my research about farming and how perhaps through the mechanism of food and having dinners and being actually just being a voice in the community allowed me to talk about the things that I cared about and the people that I cared about, and really put wind beneath their wings in terms of the work that they were doing. And we, have created this sort of like symbiotic thing through the practice of food and hospitality and the events that we do.
So, you and I were talking about what happens when it's late at night, you're feeling a little bit hungry, maybe you had dinner, and you're feeling a little thirsty. like what would you recommend, especially for people who are feeling, feeling those thoughts coming on? Is there
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think that, the cool thing about what food does is that it's so much so tied to sensory and memory that I think that one thing that I think as a general framework, I think that this time for everyone, if possible, should be a time where you can dive back into your own food histories and think about what comfort means to you through food and what it means through taste and touch and smell. I think that what I often do sometimes too, especially like into the early morning, I'll do a journal that kind of like recounts things that I am grateful for or just memories that I want to reflect on later, just to make sure that I have this sort of like personal history that I can refer to back when I need to remember how I was feeling at X date, or thinking about the fondness of a certain food that maybe I want to use for one of our menus for an event. So I think that there's something really important about just rooting yourself in where you come from and who you are and what comfort looks like first and foremost. The second thing that I recommend too, just as a sort of like habit thing and a routine thing, is that our bodies are more animal than we sometimes believe that they are. I know that working in this like capitalist framework, we're like, oh my god, like I need to eat, like I'm just gonna grab a quick. No, like I love y'all, but that is just not how it works. Having a rhythm for how you eat and how you drink throughout the day is a huge factor in how anxiety, and I know we're both. I'm saying it, but I'm also like, oh my god, what did I eat today? It's such an important part of how we are able to create healthy cycles in our rising and falling, sleep at night. Like even our bowel movements, there's a rhythm that you should pay attention to, because it will indicate how you're feeling biologically, and how the biological framework basically influences our brain chemistry. So I would say do figure out what foods make you feel good. Like keep a journal of the things that just make you feel good, so that you can remember and look back at those things. Specific things that I do that I would recommend to other people. There are three like key food things that I always think about. So I always have like a hot, warm beverage when I wake up. Is the first thing I do, and when I go to sleep, I drink something hot, just because one, it's a mind thing. Specific things that I'm drinking. I'm Jamaican, so like my mom, if I was like not drinking tea, she would probably think that something was wrong with me. So I always have. There's four that I keep in my cabinet. Of five. There's ginger. Ginger's really good for digestive health. There is Tulsi tea. It's also called holy. I think it's also called holy mint. There is chamomile, which is one of the obvious ones, and I think everyone's like, it's like very grandma, but like it actually works. Lavender is great as a tea, but it also is a really good scent. So I have like essential oils that I'll probably put on me or put on my pillow that help me to like kind of get into that sort of like calm, dreamy space. So that's one thing. The other thing is CBD and CBT. So I usually use CBT as an oil that I'll take under the tongue, or I'll put it into something that I'm drinking. And basically, I mean, CBD is great because essentially it can act as a relaxant for the body, so you don't get the high, you get the sort of relaxing qualities. That is a great supplement into food. And then the last thing I would recommend for people, just because also you don't want food to become a thing that's stressful for you. So what I like to do is I like to think about making things in batches that I can maybe like add like a sauce or like some sort of like greens to, just to like make it as easy as possible for me to do what makes me feel good throughout the day. Cooking for me is something that is meditative. So essentially like I can do it all day and feel good, but like if that's not your vibe, that's totally fine. I think that people should practice just doing a batch of like a stew. Making a broth is super like one, enriching for your body and your health, but also it takes out the guesswork of having to create meals every single time you step into the kitchen. So broths and stews and big rice dishes are kind of go-tos, and those are good because you can kind of like create more meals out of them. So I try to keep my kitchen stocked with those things at all times when I can.
Along these lines of thinking about anxiety and food, not to say they have to go together, but I think many of us have experienced this moment, especially now that we're going out less, we're going to grocery stores less. You end up at a grocery store, you're wondering about what you should get, you're trying to limit your time and be like smart about it. I know a lot of people, and I myself have made a lot of like panic buys in the last like few weeks.
Same.
Where, you're like, oh, this will be a good staple and it's canned or whatever. And you're like, what am I going to do with this after? So maybe along these lines, are there any like must get staples that you'd recommend for people? And it sounds like what you're saying is, it's different for everyone, but you're the pro. I'd love to hear what you do when you end up at a grocery store.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 things about grocery shopping which are essential. So the first one is do not go to the grocery store hungry. Don't be hungry. It is the trap of all traps. Don't do it. You'll be there longer than you want to, and you're probably going to leave hungry, which is even worse because then you have food to cook when you get home. You still can't have access to it. So 1, don't ever go to a grocery store hungry. The second thing is if you can I keep a small list of staples on me. So like I'm very close to sitting on the board of like Kit Kat or like Lifesavers because I just spend so much money buying like candy and chocolate and stuff. They just need to hire me to just be their like personal, like, I don't know. But literally probably like 80% of my budget goes to like something I probably shouldn't be at. But I think that something that saves me every time is that I make lists. So when it comes to my own health and nutrition, I know that there's certain foods that I always go to that are quick and easy and sort of fall back into that category of like broth, soups, and stews that I was talking about. So I always have a whole grain on hand. I prefer brown rice over white rice. A little bit of longer cook time, but more beneficial for your body. And I also would say like don't sleep on like greens. People usually shy away from buying greens because they're like it's gonna go bad. But actually, if you process it and freeze it, as soon as you get it, you'll have it for a really long time. The other thing that go ahead.
In terms of processing greens, and you're thinking of things like broccoli, like what kind of processing of grains?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, so many different things. Like you can roast vegetables and make them into a puree and keep that puree to soup later. You can just cut up kale. And I try to like obviously the heartier greens, so like things like kale or collard greens or even spinach, they freeze really well and can be used really well. So I'll probably throw them in the freezer and incorporate them later. And then other things like I've been trying to do more like smoothies just because it's really quick. So I'll buy a ton of fruit that's discount and then just throw it in my freezer and just have it for a long time so that I can make like a blend of something in the morning. Yeah, just the things like that where I'm just like, how do I set my day up for not having to do work that throws me off so I can just enjoy more of my day, essentially is how I think about grocery shopping.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, this is my last question. In this moment where, I think we're all looking for, people, sources of inspiration, people who are doing great things right now, where are you looking? What is that source of inspiration?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It might sound really silly, but I've actually started following a lot of doctors on Instagram right now, just because there are so many stories and so many moments where I could easily complain about what's happening to me in my life, but these people are putting their lives on the line every day in very specific ways. Have this expertise that I will never completely understand. And so it's just a way for me to shift my focus in my brain to something that's more towards gratitude, the fact that these things are in place, that people actually do care, and that, I like at the end of the day, I'm making food because I believe in generosity and humanity. And I think that doctors who care practice the same thing, right? It's all about the preservation of who we are and being able to like really assess health so that other people can enjoy their lives. And I have so much respect for that practice. The other thing that I've been doing a lot is reading, just ordering books just so I can remember that this is the moment to slow down and learn for myself. So I'm actually like studying the history of service and hospitality in America, and just
Mhm.
thinking about all of the sort of like forefathers and foremothers that came before me who have paved the way for me to go do the work that I love to do. And there's so many untold stories that you don't get to hear about anymore because these people don't have Instagram, so these people don't like tell those stories. And books are amazing sources of information still. So I would recommend just maybe picking one thing you want to learn a little bit more about and sticking with that too.
That's great. Yeah, I love that idea of staying with gratitude.
Yeah.
So for folks, and I think we'll include links to for folks who want to follow Yardi and follow you in the work that you're doing. But are there things folks should be looking out for, or go to your website? Is that the best way to
Yeah.
follow your?
So I just started a series on my Instagram. Instagram is at tuna tuna__TURNER tuna at tuna turner. Um, and essentially I've been having a lot of fun teaching people how to cook. So if you feel like you need advice, you can also like DM me at any time, ask me questions because I'm around. I want everyone to learn and feel like they can take care of themselves.
Awesome. Well, DeVonn, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sending you, we all are, we're sending wishes for, wellness and healing and, all the things right now. So thank you.
Yeah. Same to you, and thank you so much for having me here. I hope this is helpful for everyone.
Definitely. All right. Bye.
Bye. Take care.